welcome to another video. In today's video I'm going to be reviewing The Wicked King by Holly Black. This is the second book in the Folk of Air trilogy by Holly Black. I absolutely adored this book and I just love this series as a whole. It's definitely on the verge of being a guilty pleasure series for me. I mean, there's stuff that I can get nitpicky with this series, but overall I just really enjoy the series. It's just a really fun series. I do have a review up for The Cruel Prince, which is the first book in this trilogy, which I will link here somewhere. If you've never heard of this series and you're watching this now, I'll just give you a brief synopsis of what the first book was about. So you're basically following our main protagonist Jude. She's a human living in a fairy realm called Elfin. Her two sisters and Jude were taken from the human world when they were children after their parents got murdered by a fae. Fortunately for them, the fae that takes them in and raises them up is a high-ranking general and is pretty decent. He raises them up as if they're his own children, when in fact only one of her sisters is the daughter of this war general. So these sisters kind of grow up in this fairy kingdom with a bit of an advantage. However, two of them are still mortal and human, which means it's very dangerous for them to be living in this world. The fae are kind of these cruel tricksters that can tempt you into a bargain that could curse you instead, and they absolutely do not have any kindness towards humans. So even though these girls have this scary adoptive father, they still get picked on daily. These girls had to adapt and learn how to live and survive in this world. It's whimsical, but at the same time it's dark. There's a lot of court intrigue and political scheming that has kept me engaged so far. It's a fast-paced series and just very enjoyable altogether. So if you haven't read The Cruel Prince yet, this video is going to contain a bit of spoilers for the first book because this is obviously the second book in the series, and like I said, I do have a review of The Cruel Prince and you can check that out. Or if you don't care and you just want to know what The Wicked King is about, we'll get straight into the review of The Wicked King. So this book takes place 5 months after where we left off from The Cruel Prince. Jude's younger fae brother Oak is now living in the human world with her half-sister Vivi to kind of protect him from all the political scheming that's going on in the fairy courts, as it was revealed at the end of The Cruel Prince that he has Greenbrier blood, which is the royal bloodline in this fairy world, and does have a legitimate claim to the throne. Jude has managed to temporarily keep Carden on the throne through this magical agreement where he is bound to her and she can basically control him and command him to do whatever she wants. So she's now the power behind the throne. However, she soon discovers that her role in the High Court is no easy task, nor is Carden making it any easier for her, as she attempts to kind of maintain her control over her newfound political power. Not all the fae are fond of her rise in status. Jude is under a constant threat of betrayal while navigating the fairy politics. Carden has given Jude exactly 1 year and a day to have this control over him, and it's already been 5 months that have passed. With this sort of temporary alliance that they have, Jude is expecting Carden to not have any interest in politics, to continue being this puppet king where she's the one that's pulling the strings and run the realm as she pleases. She soon realizes that it's not as simple as that, especially because she's juggling multiple responsibilities at once, that being court politics as well as being a spy master, and on top of that all her family problems that are going on right now. It's kind of a lot. You're kind of introduced into the book with her having this really heavy burden that she was not expecting when she first decided to take this political power for herself, without kind of realizing that it was actually going to be a bit more harder than she initially hoped for. There's a quote by Maddox in the book where he says that power is much easier to acquire than it is to hold on to. It's Jude's conflict throughout this story. She's constantly being undermined by her peers, the court, her father Maddox, Carden, and pretty much everyone around her is trying to spot weakness in order to overthrow her power, and that means both Jude and Carden. So it was compelling to see how Jude tries to maintain that power that she has, especially because her advisory court kind of disregards her. There isn't any kind of respect for her there, because at the end of the day she is still a human. The fact that she has control over Carden is also kept secret, so no one knows that she's actually the one that's calling all the shots. Also, Carden becomes becoming High King has caused unease among the Fae, and there's this new sort of uprising and threat from the Court of Sea because they see this as an opportunity for them to wage war against the Court of the Land. Now, in terms of world building, I do like how this book kind of expands upon the world of fairy more. We do go down to the realm of the undersea for a portion of this story. It does expand the world a bit more. It was interesting to see this sort of different environment. What I appreciate about this series is that the Fae are presented in a more sort of eclectic and traditional way. It's very colorful and sort of diverse and has a range of different creatures. All the sort of characters you come across, they're very kind of creature-like. I kind of like that, and I kind of like that it kind of has a more folk tale vibe to how these Fae creatures sort of look. I mean, some of them, they still have this sort of ethereal, otherworldly sort of beauty about them, but for the most part, a lot of them have this sort of earth-like qualities to them. So I really appreciated this sort of diversity when it came to the descriptions of the different Fae folk. Unfortunately though, the world building is very similar to the first book. It's sort of surface level and it could have been fleshed out more. You do see like a wide range of like creatures and stuff, but you don't really get invested in this sort of other world and culture. Like, it's very, yeah, sort of surface level, like I said. I still want to know like the different hierarchy system between like different creatures. Again, you don't really see besides the royalty and the main characters. I still don't know how the magic works. When people are using magic and stuff, it's awesome, but I don't really know how, and I don't know if like the different Fae have different sort of magic that they can use. So I mean, that wasn't really explored that much either. I mean, which I think would have been a lot more interesting to explore and kind of make this world come alive a little bit more. They kind of just do their magic and you kind of need to just go with it without sort of asking the specific details of how it all works. So the world building is definitely not her strongest element in this series. I do love what she's revealed to us, but it could have been more fleshed out. This series focuses more on the characters. In terms of characters, our main protagonist Jude was definitely more likable in this book. Well, I liked her more. I know it can be a polarizing opinion. A lot of people don't like her, but to me, I loved her. I feel like you really see Jude grow into a more capable person in the second book. The first book, I had a bit of a problem with her development because she kind of learnt certain things like really quickly without much of an explanation, and it was hard to believe that she had gained certain skills in such a short time frame without showing much of an effort it took to learn these things. However, because this book jumps 5 months after where we left off from, I can kind of believe the sort of skills and her confidence as an advisor for the High King. I could kind of imagine how much she would have had to learn and develop her skills in this sort of role. So I could get on board with her being able to adapt and handle the situations, handle the court politics. So Jude is sort of presented as being a lot more capable than she was in the first book when it came to making harder choices. And like I said, I was sort of on board with whatever decision she decided to make, whether it was planned and schemed or if it was in the spur of the moment. It was all very Jude-like in the way she reacts and the way she responds to certain situations, and it was just... and I just adored it. Even though she's constantly disregarded and underestimated by others because she's human and mortal, she does use that as her advantage, and she's able to take control and power away from people because people constantly underestimate her, and she's proving them wrong every time they do. It definitely sort of makes you want to root for her because she is this sort of underdog character that has risen up the ranks by her wits and her sheer determination to push through the hardships in order to gain and maintain that power. She's cutthroat and ruthless because of how she grew up and adapted into this Fae world. And like I said, I just adored her. She kind of made decisions that just were a little shocking, but at the same time isn't really, because we are living in this brutal world where you have to play kind of rough. Moving on to Carden. Carden was definitely a stronger character in this book. He had more of a presence. He's definitely involved a lot more in the story. You kind of do come to an understanding of why Carden is the way that he is, why he sort of acts cruelly to others. You're kind of shown that he's more regretful of the things that he's done in the past, and he also becomes more trusting towards Jude. At the beginning of the book, he kind of seemed like he didn't care about all this court politics. He kind of wanted to continue living as he did as a prince. Jude was so sure that she could maintain control over Carden because she didn't think that he would have any desire to be High King. But at a certain point in the book, he's kind of forced into a situation where he kind of needs to take matters into his own hands and make independent decisions, and needs to learn his duties as a king without Jude's control, and he kind of needs to rule for himself. And that's sort of the point where you see more growth in his character. Once he sort of acknowledges that power and influence, he becomes more confident and assertive in his role as the High King. He's a lot more smarter than he leads on. Now, the relationship between Jude and Carden, it's still weird. It's unstable, it's problematic, but it's still so interesting to read, and it's just a compelling dynamic to follow. They dislike each other, but at the same time there's sort of this burning sort of attraction and desire for one another. Yes, it's a hate to love romance, but I feel like Carden always had a thing for her, but was conflicted and sort of repulsed by what he felt. Hence why in the first book he kind of let his friends bully both Taryn and Jude around. It's kind of intended to be a toxic sort of relationship, but then there's still moments between the two where it's just so good. I love the back and forth banter between the two, and there's probably no love yet, but there's definitely an attraction. The tell me that you hate me part, what is wrong with me? And Jude always viewed Carden in a certain way. She's constantly trying to remind herself that he hates her when he probably really doesn't. And this sort of sets a judgment towards him, but at the same time, there's this uncontrollable desire for him. I don't know what to say. I'm just gonna move on to the next character before I keep rambling on. Another character that I thought improved and developed a lot more in this book was Maddox. His interactions with Jude is just so interesting. You really start to see how he plays the political game. There's this real sense of danger towards Jude in this book because of the threat that Maddox sort of holds over Jude and the throne. He kind of sort of considers Jude his opponent playing against her, and that's scary. And Jude sort of acknowledges in the book that she's threatened by this because she doesn't want to be on his board of political scheming, and she's on it and she's worried, and I'm worried for her because as much as I like Maddox, he's a little unhinged. There's definitely a dangerous quality to him. Even if you're his lover or his family, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to be safe. It's like they're playing a game of chess where they're scheming and sort of strategizing against one another. It's conflicting for Jude because she sees Maddox as this father figure and mentor who's kind of trained and taught her everything that she knows. So Maddox sort of a fascinating character to follow because you see how far he's willing to go, even if it's against the crown for his own ambitions, and if it means that he needs to fight against his own daughter, well, so be it. He's gonna do it. He's willing to do that. When Jude sort of climbs her way up to the top of the kind of social hierarchy and decides to move against Maddox, he has this certain level of respect for her and considers her a real player in the court, and that means he's not gonna hold back with a ruthless counterattack to her plans and political maneuvering. And it gets real intense, and I loved it. Holly Black definitely does a great job creating this sort of cruel world devoid of any sort of human morals. I appreciate that everyone's sort of bad and selfish when it comes to the Fae world. When it comes to certain levels of morality or lack of, each character kind of falls into a spectrum of that morality scale. In general though, they're all sort of schemers and they make decisions and alliances for their own benefits, and I really enjoyed is probably the wrong word for it, but I just appreciated the sort of frequent lack of humanity shown through the actions of these characters. No one is morally pure or good in this story because Jude and Cotton sure aren't. Maddox definitely is not. And even Jude's sisters, Vivi and Taryn, like you would think that they're supposed to be like the nicer characters, but both of them, well, Taryn, she really annoys me actually. But Vivi, you would think that Vivi is sort of like the carefree one that doesn't care about, you know, the fairy world and wants to be in the human world. However, she does some things in this book where you kind of question whether she's actually like good. She's definitely a protagonist, but she does some things where you know that it's very wrong, but she does it anyway and she kind of brushes it off like it's nothing, and you just see that and think, yeah, it's probably because she grew up in the fairy world and she doesn't know what's sort of morally right and wrong when it comes to human morals. So yeah, even a character like Vivi is sort of flawed in that manner. So it is this fascinating world where the rules are different and deception is sort of this reoccurring theme throughout the book. Lying comes easy to Jude because she's human and she can just lie whenever she wants to. However, the Fae can't lie, and that's sort of like their fundamental flaw, but that definitely doesn't mean that they can't mislead you. In fact, they thrive off deception. You have to be very careful in the way you say things, the promises and oaths you make, as they can easily deceive you in the way that they sort of word things. They can definitely be implying certain things when it could mean the exact opposite. You have to be careful in this world. So having trust issues, it's fundamental to live in this world. Much like the first book, Holly Black struggles with the pacing. It definitely wasn't as jarring as it was in The Cruel Prince, but there are still moments in The Wicked King that suffers from pacing issues. You don't really feel the passage of time, even though months are going by. It all just seems like it's happening within a few weeks. I don't know, because some parts of the book it was okay, but I don't know, it's sort of weird, and I wish that that could have been written a bit more better. With that being said, I still loved the book, as you know. It's a darker, whimsical world that's just full of magic and wonder, but at the same time it's very dark and brutal. I loved the continuing development of the characters that we're following. It's relentlessly readable and it's just a lot of fun. The series itself is extremely addictive and I just highly enjoyed it. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. It's weird that I gave it 5 out of 5 because 5 out of 5 is supposed to be a flawless book. This book definitely wasn't flawless and it does have some issues. However, I think just emotionally and just the way I felt and enjoyed the book, it was 5 out of 5 stars, so I just ended up giving it 5 out of 5. I love the Folk of Air trilogy as a whole, so yeah. The Wicked King is a sequel and it's definitely a step up from The Cruel Prince, which I can appreciate because so often there's that middle book syndrome where the second book is not as great as the first or the last book in a trilogy. In my opinion, I don't think that this book suffers in any way. In fact, like I said, it kind of improves upon the first book, which I really appreciated, and I think that's why I kind of ended up giving it a higher rating as well. I don't know, I just love this series and I just highly recommend it. If you haven't read this series yet, what are you doing? Get on it. I loved it. I'm gonna get into a bit more spoilery things that happen now. So if you haven't read The Wicked King, you can exit the video now, or if you don't care, you can continue watching. I'm gonna spoil some things. So let's just start with the least significant characters, and that is Taryn and Locke. What is up with them? Seriously, they're the worst. First of all, I don't understand why Jude has to be so guilty towards Taryn, because Taryn's the one that actually betrayed her in the first book and sort of deceived and tricked her, and I just thought that it was such a weird thing to do to a sister. Jude just feeling sorry for it, their dynamic, it's really strange and weird, and also it seems extremely dumb that Taryn still wants to marry Locke after everything that he's done. It's like she's blind to Locke. Everyone else can see what a dumbass and jerk he is, but she still is marrying him for some reason. And also, Locke tries to murder Jude as well, which is completely insane, and this was the night before his wedding, so I don't know. Talk about a psychotic brother-in-law. Nakeisha telling Jude that someone she already trusts has betrayed her. In this world, I feel like you have to be always kind of thinking ahead and thinking that everyone's gonna betray you anyway, so I wasn't so surprised that someone in her circle was going to betray her. After she said that, I was kind of suspicious of everyone. I'm not surprised that Ghost was the traitor out of the Court of Shadows. I feel like he was the most suspicious one. And Jude ends up getting kidnapped into the undersea by Queen Olaf. I honestly don't know how to say her name. Is it Ola? I feel like the whole undersea part was a bit anticlimactic. I did appreciate the new environment, the new sort of world, the way the Fae from the undersea kind of worked their magic a little bit. So that was very interesting to see. It still was sort of surface level and it wasn't fleshed out that much. At the same time, Jude was there as a prisoner, so there wasn't much of an opportunity for her to see like more of the undersea. I guess in a sense that's kind of why it wasn't explored that much. Also, the time that she had there, it was really sort of boring, so I didn't mind that we didn't spend a lot of time in the undersea. Jude also kind of pretends to be glamoured while she's a prisoner in the undersea, which I enjoyed because she was sort of tricking them and kind of gaining more intel because they were just speaking so freely while she was there because they thought that she was glamoured. I thought there would be a lot more consequences and fallout from that later on in the story when it really didn't have much of an impact. Also, there's a part where Balkan sort of forces her to kiss him. Ew. What? It was sort of forcing because she was supposed to be glamoured, so she had no choice but to do it in order to maintain that illusion that she's a glamoured human. It kind of made me very, very uncomfortable. The whole undersea part I thought would have more of a significant impact in the overall story, but it kind of didn't lead anywhere, so it was a little disappointing. And also, Vivian, the fact that she glamoured her girlfriend Heather because she was freaking out. Mind you that Vivian didn't warn Heather about anything of the fairy realm. She just got pushed right into the thick of things with no sort of preparation, and so of course Heather would have been freaking out. She got turned into an animal at one point, so of course she would be freaking out, and the fact that she sort of glamoured her and just thought that it was just okay to do that was just so odd for Vivian. But at the same time, I kind of understand because she's half Fae and she probably doesn't really think that it's a big deal. But I'm glad that later on when Heather finds out that she breaks up with her and there's this sort of severe consequence towards Vivi's actions, that we all read and knew that that was a bad idea. Even Jude tells Vivi that's a bad idea, you shouldn't do it, but Vivi does it anyway. So again, it kind of shows that the Fae have different understanding of what's right and what's wrong. And Cardan, it's revealed that he has severe mommy and daddy issues. You kind of find out why Cardan is the way that he is, why Cardan behaves so cruelly to other people, because of the way he was neglected and raised as a child. Like the whole cat milk thing was just so tragic and a little disgusting. It was a sad time. And also Cardan's mom, the worst. Again, everyone's the worst, but she's the worst. To think that I would have felt a little bit sorry for her, and I was a little suspicious why she was in prison in the first place, and then she gets out of prison and she just becomes that annoying person in the background. She doesn't have much of a significant role in the overall story, but at the same time I'm just like irritated by her. Taryn betrays Jude again. Am I surprised? This time she pretends to be Jude and she makes this sort of political move with Maddox, and it was just so out of the blue. I did not expect that to happen, but then when it happened I was like, okay, I see how that could have happened. Like, I understand their move in that way. But also, how were they supposed to... I know Cardan was poisoned, so he wasn't in his right mind, so he could have been easily influenced. But what if he wasn't? I don't think they could have fooled Cardan. But then again, he was poisoned, so... This betrayal sort of led to a sweet moment between Jude and Cardan. This is where Cardan kind of shows that he doesn't actually hate her, and he does have this certain level of respect and trust towards her. And it was just so sweet, and there's only a handful of moments together like this between Jude and Cardan in this book, so whenever we get sweet moments like this, it was like candy and I devoured it up and I just adored it. Also, Cardan proposes to Jude and like Jude accepts to become queen so easily that I just thought something suspicious was up. Like, this was too easy, something was up. Throughout this book you kind of get a backstory of Cardan, you kind of start to feel sorry for him, you kind of start to feel for him as a character, and you kind of understand where he's at, and he is starting to show that he is becoming less cruel as a person, like less of a bully like he was in the first book. And I was kind of expecting sort of a redemption arc for him. It seemed like it was going in that direction, but then it ends up with him banishing Jude out of the fairy world. What? But also, really, was I that surprised? Because I have trust issues with every single character in this book. It seemed like something Carden would do. However, when I kind of read back to what his banishment statement was, it kind of seemed like there was a loophole in the way he worded her banishment. So I definitely think that he can bring her back. I definitely think that in the second book she won't be spending much time in the human world and she will come back into the fairy realm, because I don't know, it can't end like that. There was definitely a loophole. He was probably pissed because she killed Balkan, and you know he doesn't really want her gone. She's definitely gonna come back in the second book. She needs to, otherwise where is the story gonna go if she's just gonna be trapped in the human world? Also, I really appreciated when Carden harnessed like the true potential of the High King's power over the land during his confrontation with Queen Ola. God, every time he was definitely flexing his OP High King powers. Although he did ruin it by exiling Jude in the end. We don't need to talk about that because we know that she's coming back. And I think that's it. I think that's all I had to comment on. Have you read this book? Do you love it as much as I do? And again, I hope that you're having a wonderful reading week, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!